There are certain questions I cannot answer. For example, in the 1983 blockbuster Lone Wolf McQuade, starring Chuck Norris, David Carradine, and Barbara Carrera, Chuck Norris fights David Carradine to the death in a small Mexican village. And for some reason, David Carradine is wearing dress pants and an Argyle sweater. I can't explain that. I have no idea why he would have done that. If I was going to fight Chuck Norris in a Mexican village to the death, I would use a tank top for range of motion, and I'd probably lube up so that if he got his hands on me, if he got his paws on me, I could get away. An Argyle sweater and dress pants, I can't answer that question. I simply do not know. But I do have some questions I can answer. These are from people who've written in on my YouTube channel. If you've written in one of these questions, I really appreciate it. I think all of these are good. I've gotten quite a few questions and I've tried to weed through some of them. So let's get started. There's 10 total. Number one, your videos are very thought-provoking. Thank you. Sometimes self-serving, but always frank and truthful. I love that. I'm sure I am self-serving. I'm not really sure what the self is anymore, but let's move on. I really appreciate this. I'm interested in knowing your workflow in creating a print product, not necessarily step by step, but in terms on time and knowing when to start. What parts do you gather before starting? Do you follow a pattern or do you improvise as you go along? Thank you for your time. When you say print product, that's what I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to break that into two things. A single lone photograph, print, and then a book or magazine project. Very different scenarios. And oh, by the way, as of 2 days ago, Blurb now offers wall art. So if you open your BookWrite software, you will let the program update and you will see that you can now order canvas, acrylic, and metal prints through Blurb. I've tested it. It's fantastic. I've got a whole bunch more prints I'm going to make. An individual print I will typically make after I make the image in the field and I know that I have something really good. Those are rare moments, let's be honest, but when I have something good, I know I'm going to make a print of it, and it's pretty simple. The book and magazine is very different. I've been shooting photographs in story form my entire life, so I've never been a onesie photographer. I've never been someone that walks around looking for random images. I do that to entertain myself, but anytime I do a project, it's always with sequence in mind, with bodies of photographs. So I go into those projects knowing that that's what I'm going to make when I come out. So I'm compiling an incredible amount of data as I go. That's written, that's visual, it's any other kind of thing I can collect. And sometimes I design it as I go, like I did in Albania last year, and other times I wait for a couple of years before I really have a big chunk of work before I then start to design it. And sometimes I'll land on the exact product I thought I would make, and other times I make something different. All right, number two, how do you strike the balance between doing your spade work for a private idea, seeing what's been done before and who has done it, and yet avoiding being derivative of that work? So what I think he means by spade work is like the heavy lifting, the shoveling. How do you strike the balance for a project idea, seeing what's been done before? I don't really care what's been done before. I need to know about it. But if it's a story that interests me, I'm going to do it regardless. I mean, I've done stories that I knew had been done before, the very specific story, but I researched the photographer, I saw what they did, and I realized that I was not copying them. My technique was totally different, my angle was totally different, my ideals of the project were totally different. So I just find things I'm interested in, people, places, things, concepts, and I just go back over and over again and I make projects. I'm lucky because I don't do this for a living anymore. When you do this for a living, it completely changes everything. It sucks a lot of the fun out of it. I have no desire to do this for a living anymore, but I love doing these projects. Okay, number three, if you were to start your photography career in 2020, would you follow the same path as you did in the 90s? Absolutely not, because there are no paths. Every single path I had in the 90s is gone. They are legitimately gone. I started as a newspaper intern, then I got an unofficial position with the staff, then I transitioned from newspaper to magazine freelance, walking in both worlds at the same time. Then I left the paper business and went into magazines full time. I did commercial, did a little bit of advertising, did all these things. All those paths are gone. Now, on one side, that's a bad thing because you don't have these roadmaps that you can follow. But on the upside is you can kind of invent whatever path you want, because in the 2000s or now, we have all these avenues we didn't have before. I didn't have the internet. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have any online community. I had no connection with the outside world. My only connection to being a photographer were a handful of people in New York City who could make decisions about hiring me. So it was an incredibly limiting time frame in some ways and incredibly beautiful in others because I did not have the noise of modern culture to deal with. And today I would say the noise of modern culture is 90% of what you see in photography. Okay, number four. How do you recommend a photographer start a career or get work in today's society without the use of social media? Great question. Put a star, put an asterisk by this. You do not need social media. The reason the industry is telling you do is that they are lazy. They want everyone in the same funnel so that when they're looking for photographers, they don't have to look anywhere else outside of whatever the flavor of the month funnel is. It used to be Facebook, then it was Twitter. Now it's Instagram, and in a couple of years, it's going to be something else, and they're going to try to funnel everybody into this because people have created this myth, this false idea that everyone is in a hurry. And most of these people are in a hurry because they've chosen to be in a hurry. They've chosen to be frenetic. They've chosen to buy into the nonsense and the noise of modern culture. If I was going to be a photographer today, the first and foremost thing I would have is an email newsletter. And yes, you heard that correctly, and no, it's not 1995. The email newsletter is one of the single most important things you can have. When someone opts in to be a part of your newsletter, they are opting in at a level that is far beyond social media. Social is noise. 99% of the time, it results in nothing other than a waste of time and a bunch of artificial praise. Newsletters are basically a way for you to build a legitimate following of people. And I'm not talking about 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, even though I know photographers that have that many people in their email database. Even 500 names or 1,000 names is a real solid starting point, especially if you're going to put a book into the world or you're putting a project. These are people who legitimately believe in what you're doing. To me, it's far healthier and far more worthwhile than it is to be on Instagram for 8 hours a day looking at stuff you can't remember 5 minutes later. All right, hello. First of all, thank you for your videos, which really motivate me. I'd like to ask you what you think about sharpness in photography. Is it overrated? All technical aspects of photography are overrated. They always have been. It's why photography is the stepchild of the art world. It's why one of the reasons why photography's never really gotten its due is that photographers are geeks and they obsess over a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. Looking at a painting and saying, gee, he should have used a much smaller brush and gotten a little sharper. It doesn't matter. It's about the overall feel of an image. There have been plenty of historical images through time. Look at Robert Capa's D-Day images where the film was melted in the dryer. Those images are blurry. They work perfectly. They look awesome. Don't worry about sharpness. Okay, moving on. Nowadays, makes and models of cameras do not seem to matter much. If sensors and to a certain extent lenses still have an important role to play, most of the work on a photo is done in post-production. This surely has an incidence on aesthetics and the way photos are taken. Any thoughts on the vital subject? I'm not a big post-production fan. I try to adhere to what I would be able to do in the darkroom, in the traditional darkroom, in the computer. Most of what I see in amateur photography sites, and these are the online photo communities, is far too much manipulation. Far, 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 far too much. Pixel by pixel, going in with the digital pens and painting back light. There's so many images I see in the prosumer space where I look at an image and the light is doing something in an image that is impossible in the natural world. Light does not behave in the same way that you do when you have a pen on your computer or your Wacom tablet and you're getting into the minutia and dodging and burning and making things look insane. I don't do that. I try to stick to whatever I do in the wet darkroom. My post-production takes less than 10 seconds. I select a group of images, I apply a small mid-tone curve, bump, and I'm done and I export. I don't sharpen images, I don't do any of that stuff because it just looks too manipulated. Okay, number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. Is street photography an exhausted medium? I wish it was, but I don't think it is. Have all the different styles been exhausted? I shoot street and I've gotten some great shots, but to be honest, they look like great versions of past masters. Love to hear thoughts. I'm not a street photography fan. I spoke about this when I talked about long-term projects. I like attached projects. Most of the street projects I see are completely detached. The hipsters love it. Young photographers love it because there is no attachment. You don't need access. You don't need permission. You don't need a relationship. You don't need to talk to people. You jump out, you bang on the street for a couple hours, and then you go spend the rest of the day promoting it on YouTube or promoting it on Instagram. It's boring. I don't like most of that photography, but that's my personal opinion. I know a ton of other people who live for street photography. I think it will get harder and harder to do because of privacy laws. And the way that these young photographers are working is not going to help them in the long run, because when you see people jumping out in front of civilians and terrorizing them with a camera, that's how laws tend to get passed, right? So there's legislation on the books in multiple countries around the world about outlawing photography in public places, about not showing any recognizable brand. These have been on the books for a long time. People think they have the right to photograph. That can go away in a heartbeat. A lot of laws are being passed about that. So I don't think it's an exhausted medium. I think there's always the chance that someone comes along who adds to the conversation. I just haven't seen that person in a long time. You know, the days of the Bruce Gildens and those days are long past. Everyone else is being derivative of him, and they just don't seem to realize that he's already done that. So unless you're going to add something new to the conversation, you can't claim it and think that you're a superstar. One of the latest videos, you mentioned creating photos that the general public as opposed to the photography audience can connect with. Yes, I talked about shooting for the general public and not for other geeky photographers. How important is it for you to have the general audience connect with your photos? I find the general public tends to respond more to formulaic, generic, tangible content composition. I suppose it goes back to the object for the content, especially with the context of storytelling. You can't shoot pictures that you think the public is going to like because, to your point, the public typically isn't educated about what great photography is, and they're going to look for the cliche landscape or whatever it is. You have to shoot your own images, but I could care less what other photographers think of my images. I was never paid by other photographers. They were never my audience. They were the ones never buying the work. In fact, other photographers would often take pot shots at you and snipe at you and talk behind your back and do the things that we all do in every other industry in the world. So I prefer, if I'm going to do a project, I'm shooting for the general population. I'm shooting for people who may not know anything about this. I'm using my talent as a photographer to make my images the best possible images I can, but I need the public to respond. I'm not dumbing down my images to fit the public's point of view. I'm trying to pull the public towards my style of image. And again, photographers do not factor in any way, shape, or form. Okay, two more. I've been living in Japan for 11 years now. This is a great question, Kurt, by the way. And I would like to do a project on Japan, Japanese culture from a foreigner's point of view. Do you think Japan as a project is too big? Would you recommend breaking it down into smaller projects such as sports, food, gaming, religion, etc.? How about breaking it down by city? How would you begin a project like this? Kurt, that is a great question. Japan is too big, unless you don't have to work and that's all you ever have to do the rest of your life. This is a story that's been done a lot. And that's why I think this is such a great question. Yes, you should do this story. Even though it's been done, do it yourself, because I'm not interested in the overall story. I am, but that's not my primary driving force. You said something in your first sentence. I've lived in Japan now for 11 years. You're not from Japan. You're a foreigner. So what I'm interested in are the little vignettes of life in Japan that are reflected in these other industries, but they're your vignettes. I don't need a lot of photographs. I need a few, but what I need is the copy that goes along with it. Like Memories of a Dog by Dado Moriyama. That's a great book. Yes, it's a photography book, but the copy is as important or more important than the actual images. So I need vignettes of your life and the written copy that show me why these are poignant moments to you. This is a quiet book. This is a 6x9 with a single image on the left-hand page with a small caption, beautifully designed, with a little piece of artwork on the right side, maybe the GPS coordinates from where you made the image, the location, the state, the country, etc. Just quiet little vignette moments of why this is an important story to you. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in you as well as the photographs. Last question. As we all know, all of today's cameras are megapixel overkill. How many megapixels do you think get you the same amount resolution of film? I have no idea. I don't know who wrote that question in. I'm sorry, I didn't put the names with everything. I have no idea. I don't know anything technical about photography. I don't know about megapixels or what replaces. Film and digital are totally different. The way that light is registered on a sensor compared to film is totally different. The lifestyle of film is completely different from the lifestyle of digital. The time frames, the limitations, all of that are so different. I don't know how to quantify that in terms of megapixel. I honestly have no idea. My camera's a 24 megapixel. It looks really great. A really good scan of a 35 millimeter image, maybe a 55 to 70 meg file. They look pretty good. They just look different because they're aesthetically different. So sorry about that. I don't really know much about the technical side, but I hope that was helpful to you. Any questions you have, send them in. Put them in the comments or however else you want to reach out to me, and I will answer them on the next Q&A. I'm hoping to do this on a fairly regular basis, but I have like 6 films I'm on the hook for this week alone, so I'm a bit rushed and I have no idea when I'm going to get to it. Thanks for tuning in. Am I supposed to say that now? Thanks for tuning in. I just did. So anyway, talk to you soon.